Well, hello there, everyone. Welcome. Well, it's been, I don't know, a week or two, I'm not sure, since my last update. And I actually this time don't have a whole bunch positive to report. You see the bumpers on. Good or bad as that might be, I'm not really sure yet. This is where we're at this stage. We're doing stuff. The rocker moldings are on. We're doing stuff that's supposed to be wrap up, and what it's doing is more like backup. Put the bumper on the other day using the cart over there. Put the bumper on the cart, jacked it up a bit off the cart with some blocks of wood. Put it in front, put all the brackets on it, all that other stuff, had it all ready to mount on the car. And then parked it over here under the front of the car and slowly let the car down to where the brackets lined up with the frame. And then one bolt hole at a time, mounted it to the frame. And then, you use the jack with a piece of wood under the front of the bumper to adjust it where I wanted it so I could fasten it. And then the other day, the one positive thing I have to report is that I got the front end aligned Wednesday. Drove it up to South San Francisco, which is 7-8 miles away. And during that drive, decided that the carburetor still isn't right. It's better, but you still have to kind of fight it to get it to move the car, to get it, away from stopped. So I still have to play with jetting some more, and I have talked to the tech again. There's a local guy here that used to be a Edelbrock tech for like 25 years. And talking to these guys and having them here obviously is way different, two different things. So he's kind of advising me based on my descriptions, which is never a good thing. That's secondhand at best. I may end up having to hire him if he's willing, have him, work on it hands-on. But I have another idea that I'm going to run by him, and I'm probably going to try. I did a whole bunch of calculation. I believe it's still too rich. I took a few of the plugs out, and they're all black. It still stinks when it's idling, when it's running. And it has used, I know I put 2 5-gallon cans of gas in the tank, plus maybe 3 and a piece out of another container. And I drained it the other day because the sender wasn't working right. It's not sending the accurate ohms to the gauge, so the gauge is never reading half after all of that gas. But I did find that it used a whole bunch of that gas. I only had maybe 4 gallons of gas after driving it maximum 15 miles. So it's got to be too rich. So anyway, I'm going to have to play with the carburetor some more. There's another, I'm going to rejet it down to a smaller jet. I think leaves the same rods that are in it now, metering rods that are in it now, and drop the jets down one size, because according to everything I can calculate, the dimension difference between the rods and the jets and all of that, I should be dropping it another 4%. Doing that, and only dropping the power side by maybe 3.5%, 3%. Power side seems to be, it's fine if that's a little rich. But anyway, that's where that is. So like I said, I'm not making much in the way of forward steps. I'm feeling like whatever I'm doing now, I'm making things worse. I got this extra tank here that I'm using as a mule to adjust the float on the sender so that when it's hitting the top of the tank, it's reading the maximum ohms. And when it's sitting in there, right now that tank is upside down. You see that little plug there, that's the bottom of the tank. So that when the float is against the top of the tank, it's reading 30 ohms. That's a 0 to 30 sender. And when it's laying there with the tank empty, it's reading 0. And you gotta, when you get these things, they're nowhere near accurate. There's a newer one. That's the one I took out of the tank and proceeded playing with it, proceeded to ruin it. So I have another one coming. And when you get them, they don't read anywhere near 0 to 30. You got to start playing with them immediately to get them to read 0 to 30. And then you put them in the tank, and the float hits the bottom of the tank, and it's reading 10. And the float hits the top of the tank, and it's reading 40 or 20 or whatever, some goofy numbers. So you got to play with it and try and play with it without wrecking it in the process. So that's kind of where we're at right now. In the meantime, to do something that felt positive and productive, I finished putting this together so that it's ready to go. I got delayed a couple of times since Friday. I was going to start it. Today's Sunday. I was going to try and start it Friday and then got pulled off. And yesterday, got a little distraction as well. Spent most of the day on that. So here we are. I'm going to roll this outside now. Maybe I'll put the camera on the tripod and let it run while we try and start this. This hasn't run. The last time this was on the stand was 2012. It was 8 years ago, because I looked up the pictures. I didn't remember. So I looked up the pictures. The stand was actually built around this motor. This is the first motor that was on the stand. Then I had another one that I put together and sold, and then I had this motor that's in the 57. So this one's back on. This has been sitting for 8 years now. I didn't want it to sit any longer without running. So here we are. I'm going to try and restart it. I checked the plugs, cleaned the plugs and everything, put new spark plug wires on it, because the ones that were on there originally were, in order to miss the manifold, I had them coming over the top on some wire things. These here is another new set, but I've got them. I made some supports for them where they go around the bottom side of the manifold, the exhaust manifold. I made some heavy wire supports, you might call it, that I could tie wrap the cable tie the spark plug wires to the heavy wire and keep them away from exhaust manifold. So anyway, and I took opened the carburetor up, made sure there was no dirt in there. It was really clean. It had some dust in it, what had dried up, minor dust, a couple of Q-tips with some lacquer thinner, and that was gone. Anyway, so we're ready to try and start this, see what it does. Okay, we'll see where we go from here. The other thing I didn't mention is on my trip up to South City and back, I noticed when I got back, after having the bumper installed and kind of jacked into place, so all the bumper's a little twisted. You get a big old heavy piece of metal like that, it's never going to be shaped exactly the way you want it. So you got to kind of coax it where you want it. So I did that. Well, there's this bracket right there that goes up inside the fender here, and that bolt on the bumper, you see that hole, mounts to it. Well, evidently I must have had some tension on that, because I know when I went and take that bracket off, the bolt wouldn't come out. It was caught in there. It wasn't nice and free in the two holes. So anyway, I get back from South City, and the next time I open the driver's door, it's conflicting with the fender. So what it did is I guess the amount of strain from that front bumper on the bottom of the fender there closed that gap at the top. It closed that gap at the top so that where the moldings are right there, or just below, when you open the door, it's catching the inside of the fender. So I got to play with that. That's another backward step we took. But again, that's just the process. I think again, I'm learning. That's the process you go through when you do one of these. This fender. When we took this car apart, this fender was actually welded to the rocker molding on the bottom. They had this skinny little weld there, this tiny little weld, and then they painted it. They welded it on, they set it up there, and they welded it. They painted it with it assembled. And, I carefully ground that loose. The bolt was broken off. The bolt where it's supposed to attach was broken off, and instead of drilling it out and re-tapping it, they welded the fender there. So, we're making things better, but it's a multi-step process and a little frustrating at times. Anyway, bye. Okay, are you guys ready? This is, I guess you could call this a cold start. This motor hasn't run in 8 years. So here we go. You're going to experience this right when I do. When I removed the top off the carburetor to make sure it was clean inside, I filled the float bowls before I put it back together. So theoretically, it ought to fire up. Even the gas line and the fuel pump, I'm sure, is dry. But the float bowl is full of fuel, so that ought to run it long enough to get the fuel pump going and all the rest of that stuff, if theory prevails. So here goes. You experience this with me. Let's see what happens. Oh, it's going to make a bunch of smoke because I put Marvel Mystery Oil in all the cylinders. I put like 2 squirts of oil in all the cylinders, so it's obviously it's going to smoke. Be ready. It's going to smoke if we're lucky enough for it to run. Oops, turn the main on. Let's see what happens. Ignition on. Here goes. On it starting, that's good. And it isn't smoking a whole lot either. Got 40 pounds of oil pressure. Coming off the exhaust manifold on the other side. You can see off the exhaust itself, the pipes themselves. Probably a little oil on them. probably have to adjust those idle screws. Not bad for having sat for 8 years. So that's where we're going to leave it. Thanks for watching. Bye.